Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to a number of new members of our Patreon: Katie, Laura, Stefan, Patrick, Angela, and Beth, who also makes the wonderful audio drama podcast We Fix Space Junk, which I highly recommend to you. And no, she didn't ask me to say that. I just really like it, and I think you might too. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. Your help makes it possible to keep producing new episodes week after week and keep them ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in learning about the perks available to Patreon subscribers, including exclusive episodes heard nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight we're returning to a marvelous little book of science, Astronomy for Young Folks by Isabel Martin Lewis, A.M., connected with the Nautical Almanac Office of the U.S. Naval Observatory. Copyright 1922 by Duffield and Company, New York. Let's pick up where we left off. Chapter 14, Stars of the Southern Hemisphere. As one travels southward from the mid-latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere into the tropics, our familiar circumpolar constellations sink lower and lower in the northern heavens, and strange and unfamiliar star groups rise gradually above the southern horizon. If we make our southward journey in the winter months, the first of the southern constellations to come fully into view is the small star group just south of Lepus, known as Columba, the Dove, whose brightest star, Fact, is of the second magnitude. A line drawn from Procyon to Sirius and extended as far again brings us to this star, and a line from Betelgeuse to Sirius extended in equal distance brings us to Zeta Argus, which is equal to Fact in brightness. The two lines intersecting at Sirius make the Egyptian X, as it is called. Magnificent blue-white Canopus, the most brilliant star in the heavens next to Sirius, a veritable diamond sparkling low in the southern sky, now commands our unqualified admiration. Canopus lies about 35 degrees south of Sirius and is invisible north of the 37th parallel of latitude. At 9 o'clock in the evening of February 6th, it can be seen just above the southern horizon in that latitude, and is then a conspicuous object in Georgia, Florida, and the Gulf states. The Star of Egypt, whose proud light never hath beamed on those who rest in the white islands of the West, writes more of Canopus in Lalla Rookh. Along the Nile, Canopus was an object of worship as the god of waters. At the time of their erection, 6400 BC, a number of temples in Upper Egypt were oriented so as to show Canopus at sunrise at the autumnal equinox. and other temples erected many centuries later were oriented in a similar manner. In China, as late as 100 BC, and in India also, Canopus was an object of worship. The astronomer tells us that Canopus is immeasurably distant from the Earth. It has been estimated to be 40,000 times more luminous than our Sun. Canopus is located in the constellation of Argo Navis, which is the largest and most conspicuous constellation in the heavens. In addition to Canopus, it contains a number of second and third magnitude stars, and is subdivided for convenience into Puppis the prow, Carina the keel, and Vela the sails. Huge as it is, Argo Navis represents only half of a ship, for the stern is lacking. According to the legend, this ship was built by Argos, aided by Pallas Athena, for Jason, the leader of the expedition of the 50 Argonauts who sailed from Greece to Colchis in search of the Golden Fleece. Pallas Athena placed in the bow of the ship a piece of timber from the speaking oak of Dodona to guide the crew and warn them of dangers. And after the voyage, the ship was supposed to have been placed in the heavens. An Argo Navis is one of the finest telescopic objects in the heavens, the Keyhole Nebula, as it is usually called, from a peculiar shaped dark patch in its brightest part. On the border of this nebula is the deep red wonder star of the Southern Hemisphere, Eta Argus, which varies suddenly and unexpectedly in brightness between the 7th and 1st magnitudes. In 1843, it burst forth with a splendor rivaling Sirius, and maintained this brilliancy for nearly 10 years, and then slowly waned in brilliancy until it disappeared to the unaided eye in 1886. The surrounding nebula also seems to share in its peculiar fluctuations of brightness. Eta Argus is now a star of the 7th magnitude, and since it is still varying fitfully in brightness, it is believed that the history of its light changes is not complete. Among the constellations of the southern heavens near the meridian in February, we see, in addition to Argo Navis, the constellations of Dorado the goldfish, Hydrus the serpent, and Tucana the toucan. Though insignificant in appearance, Dorado contains what was described by Sir John Herschel as one of the most extraordinary objects in the heavens, a worthy rival of the great Orion Nebula, and in some respects very similar to it, the Great Looped Nebula, the center of a great spiral. In Dorado also is located the Greater Magellanic Cloud, which looks like a detached portion of the Milky Way, though it is far removed from it. To the naked eye, it resembles a small white cloud about 4 degrees in extent. In the telescope, it bears a close resemblance to a typical portion of the Milky Way. A similar formation, known as the Lesser Magellanic Cloud, is located in Hydrus. It has been estimated that the distance of the Lesser Cloud is 80,000 light years, and that it is receding from us. In Tucana is located one of the finest globular star clusters in the heavens, known as 47 Tucani. This cluster and Omega Centauri a globular star cluster in Centaurus, are the two nearest of all the globular clusters. They are distant from the Earth about 22,000 light years, and it is known that the combined light of the thousands of stars of which each cluster is composed is about 1,000,000 times that of our own Sun. In the western sky in the Southern Hemisphere in February may be seen the brilliant white first magnitude star Achernar in the river Eridanus, the long winding constellation that, we recall, starts near the brilliant Rigel in Orion and disappears from the view of northern observers below the southern horizon, extending its course far into the Southern Hemisphere. Achernar means the end of the river, and this is nearly its position in the constellation. Though Argo Navis is the largest and most important constellation of the Southern Hemisphere, Crux, the Southern Cross, far famed in story and legend as well as for its historical associations, is beyond a doubt the most popular. The best time to view the Southern Cross is in June or July when it is near the meridian. It is not seen to advantage in the months of January or February. It then lies on its side and close to the horizon, and therefore is dimmed by atmospheric haze, so that it is almost invariably a disappointing object to the tourist from the north, who usually views it for the first time in one of these months. The cross is viewed to advantage in the latitude of Rio or Valparaiso, and it is best seen from the straits where it rides high overhead. It is not seen to advantage from the latitudes of Cuba or Jamaica. It is small, only 6 degrees in extent from north to south, and less in width, and it lies in the most brilliant portion of the Milky Way, which is here a narrow stream only 3 or 4 degrees wide. Directly below the cross is the noted coal sack, apparently a yawning chasm in the midst of its brilliant surroundings, though probably in reality a dark nebula. Viewed with the telescopes, a number of stars are to be seen projected on this dark background. The Southern Cross is to the inhabitants of the Southern Hemisphere what the Big Dipper is to those who dwell in the Northern Hemisphere, an infallible timepiece. The upright of the cross points toward the south pole of the heavens, which lies in a region where there is a singular dearth of bright stars. The nearest star to the south pole being a faint 5th magnitude star called Sigma Octantis. When seen in the southeast or southwest, the cross lies on its side, but when passing the meridian it stands nearly upright. Humboldt, referring to this fact, says, "How often have we heard our guides exclaim in the savannas of Venezuela and in the desert extending from Lima to Trujillo, 'Midnight is past, the cross begins to bend.'" By the explorers of the 16th century, the cross was taken as a sign of heaven's approval of their attempt to establish the Christian religion in the wilds of the New World. This thought is beautifully expressed in Mrs. Hemans' lines in The Cross of the South. "But to thee, as thy lodestars resplendently burn, in their clear depths of blue, with devotion I turn, bright cross of the South, and beholding thee shine, scarce regret the loved land of the olive and vine. Thou recallest the ages when first o'er the main my fathers unfolded the ensign of Spain, and planted their faith in the regions that see its imperishing symbol ever blazoned in thee. Alpha Crucis, the brightest star in Crux, is at the foot of the cross. It consists in reality of two second-magnitude stars forming a beautiful double, while a third fifth-magnitude star, 1½ minutes of arc distant, makes with this pair a combination similar to our Mizar and Alcor of the Big Dipper, though the separation is not great enough to be visible to the naked eye. The second magnitude star at the head of the cross is a deep orange in color, and the two stars that mark the ends of the cross arm are white third magnitude stars. Southern constellations in July. One of the finest constellations of the Southern Hemisphere is Centaurus the Centaur, which surrounds Crux on the north and is more than 60 degrees in length. Its center lies about 50 degrees south of Spica in Virgo, and below the tail of Hydra. Alpha Centauri, its brightest star, and the nearest star to the solar system, 4 1/3 light years away, is a golden yellow double star that forms with the star Beta Centauri on the west, a configuration similar to that of Castor and Pollux in Gemini, only one that is far more striking because of the superior brilliancy of the stars. Alpha Centauri lies in the Milky Way and transits the meridian at the same time with Arcturus, though it cannot be seen north of the 29th parallel. Alpha Centauri, like Canopus, was an object of worship in Egypt, and a number of temples in northern Egypt were oriented to its emergence from the sun's rays in the morning at the autumnal equinox between 3000 and 2575 BC. North of Centaurus is the constellation Lupus, the Wolf, which is also crossed by the Milky Way. According to one myth, Lupus is held in the right hand of the centaur as an offering upon the altar, which is represented by the constellation of Ara, next to Centaurus on the east. Ara also is crossed by the Milky Way. Neither Lupus nor Ara contain any objects that are worthy of special attention. Triangulum Australe, the southern triangle, a little to the southeast of Alpha Centauri, is far more conspicuous than the triangulum of the northern hemisphere. The accompanying charts give two views of these principal southern constellations that lie within 40 degrees of the south pole of the heavens, and that are below the horizon in 40 degrees north latitude. The first of these charts shows the constellations that are nearest the meridian in the early evening hours in February. Canopus and Argonavis and the Greater Magellanic Cloud then lie close to the meridian. Argonavis, with its subdivisions Puppis, Vela, and Carina, are found east of the meridian, lying directly in the path of the Milky Way, which stretches diagonally across the sky from the northwest to the southeast. Far over in the southeast appears Crux, the Southern Cross, also directly in the path of the Milky Way. In the western heavens may be seen the Lesser Magellanic Cloud in Hydrus, brilliant Achernar in Eridanus, and the inconspicuous star group of Tucana. In the early evening hours of July, we find as shown on the second chart, Alpha and Beta Centauri in Centaurus close to the meridian, Lupus due north of Centaurus, Ara and Triangulum Australe in the southeast, and Crux in fine position for observation just west of the meridian. Carina of Argonavis lies to the southwest of Crux. The Milky Way now arches magnificently across the heavens from Carina through Crux, Centaurus and Lupus and Ara, to the zodiacal groups of Scorpio and Sagittarius in the northeast. In the northern part of the heavens, as seen from the Southern Hemisphere, appear the familiar zodiacal constellations that we of the Northern Hemisphere find south of the zenith, as well as the constellations of Orion, Lepus and Canis Major, Hydra, Corvus and Crater, Ophiuchus and Serpens and Aquila, all finely in view in their appropriate seasons. It is only our familiar circumpolar constellations of the north, the two Bears, Draco, Cassiopeia and Cepheus, Andromeda and Perseus and Auriga, that are invisible in mid-latitudes of the Southern Hemisphere, just as the constellations shown in the diagrams, and a few additional groups such as Pavo, Grus, Phoenix, Apis, Mensa, and Volans, which we have not shown, lie hidden from view beneath the southern horizon in mid-latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere. The northern visitor to the Southern Hemisphere, familiar with the constellations of his own land, is filled with a queer sensation of being in topsy-turvydom as he sees familiar Orion standing on his head, and all of the zodiacal constellations passing in their daily motions to the north instead of to the south of his zenith, while by day the sun passes across the northern part of the heavens and culminates north instead of south of his zenith. He misses the familiar dippers of his own land and searches in vain for a pole star in the unfamiliar circumpolar regions of the south. Chapter 15. The Milky Way or Galaxy. Broad and ample road whose dust is gold, and pavement stars as stars to thee appear, seen in the galaxy, that Milky Way which nightly as a circling zone thou seest powdered with stars. John Milton, Paradise Lost. On clear winter evenings one may see a portion of the zone of the Milky Way, which encircles the heavens, arching magnificently across the heavens as it passes from Cassiopeia and Cepheus in the northwest, through Perseus and Auriga and the eastern part of Taurus, across the feet of Gemini, between Canis Minor and Orion, and through the eastern part of Canis Major to the southern horizon. At this point it passes beyond our range of vision into the star groups of Puppis, Vela, and Carina, subdivisions of the huge southern constellation of Argo Navis. It reaches its greatest distance south of the celestial equator and also attains its greatest brilliancy in Crux, the far-famed Southern Cross. From here it turns northward once more, passing into Centaurus, Musca, Circinus Ara, and Lupus constellations of the Southern Hemisphere, and comes within our range of vision again in Sagittarius and Scorpio. Here the Milky Way divides into two branches, though some astronomers now believe that this apparent division into two branches is due to the presence of an enormous cloud of non-luminous matter lying along the course of the Milky Way at this point, similar in its nature to the dark holes and caves and streaks that appear in all portions of the Milky Way, and most notably athwart its course in Argo and Centaurus. One of these branches of the Milky Way passes from Sagittarius through Aquila to Cygnus, and the other through Scorpio, Ophiuchus, and Serpens to Cygnus, the two extending diagonally across the heavens in the late summer and early fall evenings, from the northeast to the southwest. From Cygnus, the Milky Way passes into Cepheus and Cassiopeia, and thus completes its circuit of the heavens. It is not seen to advantage in spring or early summer evenings, because it then rests nearly on the horizon. Its plane is inclined about 63 degrees to the celestial equator, and its poles lie in the constellations of Coma Berenices and Cetus. These are the 2 points that lie farthest from the Milky Way. The Milky Way has been called the groundwork of the universe. By far the greater number of all the stars are crowded towards its plane in the form of an enormous flattened disk or lens. Our solar system, it has been estimated, lies close to the plane of the Milky Way, and at a distance of some 50,000 or 60,000 light-years from its center. The diameter of the Milky Way, as deduced from Dr. Harlow Shapley's work on globular star clusters, is about 300,000 light-years in extent, or 10 times greater than the limit set some years ago. The apparent crowding together of the stars into dense clouds in the Milky Way is partly an effect due to our position in the Milky Way. When we look at the heavens in a direction at right angles to this plane, we find comparatively few stars lying along our line of vision, because the stars are actually fewer in number in this direction. If we look along the plane of the Milky Way, however, we see to a greater distance through an enormous depth of stars. Though individual stars may not be much closer together in the Milky Way than they are outside of it, there are, on the whole, more of them, and the effect of greater density is produced. Father Hagen of the Vatican Observatory, who has for years made a study of the dark clouds of obscuring matter and dark nebulae that abound in space, has found evidence of the existence of many vast clouds of dark obscuring matter over the entire heavens, above and below the plane of the Milky Way, as well as surrounding the Milky Way in its own plane. The existence of such clouds of non-luminous matter would account partly for the comparative fewness of stars in space outside of the plane of the Milky Way, since many stars would be concealed from our eyes by these obscuring clouds. There is, however, in addition, an actual crowding of all the visible stars toward this plane. The peoples of all ages have honored the Milky Way in story and legend. It has been universally referred to as the Sky River and the Pathway of Souls. In The Galaxy, Longfellow thus describes the Milky Way. Torrent of light and river of the air, along whose bed the glimmering stars are seen, like gold and silver sands in some ravine, where mountain streams have left their channels bare. In Sweden, where the Milky Way arches high through the zenith in winter, it is called the Winter Street, and Miss Edith Thomas writes thus beautifully of it in her poem entitled The Winter Street. Silent with stardust, yonder it lies, the winter street, so fair and so white, winding along through the boundless skies, down heavenly vale, up heavenly height. Faintly it gleams like a summer road, when the light in the west is sinking low, silent with stardust, by whose abode does the winter street in its windings go? And who are they, all unheard and unseen? Oh, who are they whose blessed feet pass over that highway smooth and sheen? What pilgrims travel the winter street? Are they not those whom here we miss in the ways and the days that are vacant below, as the dust of that street their footfalls kiss? Does it not brighter and brighter grow? Beautiful indeed are these poetic fancies, but none of them picture even remotely the awe-inspiring grandeur of the Milky Way as it actually exists. Millions upon millions of far-distant suns, equal to or surpassing our own sun in brilliancy, are gathered within this vast encircling zone of the heavens, their combined light giving to the naked eye the impression of a milky band of light. 9/10 of all the stars, it has been estimated, lie close to the plane of the galaxy, as well as all the vast expanses of luminous gaseous nebulae and clouds of dark obscuring matter, all seemingly intermingled in chaotic confusion. Yet law and order govern the motions of all. Here also are the great moving star clusters such as the Pleiades and the Hyades, and all of the brilliant Orion stars. The structure of the Milky Way is not clearly understood, but many astronomers believe there is evidence that it takes the form of a vast spiral nebula, along whose arms the stars pass to and fro. Beyond the Milky Way, at enormous distances of many thousands of light years, but apparently influenced by it, lie the globular star clusters and the spiral nebulae. The spirals appear to avoid the plane of the Milky Way, for they are receding in the direction of its poles at high velocities. The globular clusters, on the other hand, are drawing in toward the Milky Way on either side, and in time will cross it. Whether these objects external to the Milky Way form with it one enormous universe, or whether the spiral nebulae are in turn galaxies or island universes, as the astronomer calls them, similar in form and structure to our own galaxy, and at inconceivably great distances of millions of light years from it, is still one of those riddles of the universe which the astronomers are attempting to solve. Chapter 16: The Surface of the Sun. The visible surface of the sun is called the photosphere. Even the smallest telescopes will show its peculiar rice-grain structure, consisting of intensely brilliant flecks or nodules about 500 miles in diameter, which can be resolved by the more powerful telescopes into smaller particles about 100 miles in diameter against a darker background. It has been estimated that these bright nodules or rice grains occupy only 1/5 of the total surface of the sun, yet radiate 3/4 of the total light. It is generally believed that the rice grains are the summits of highly heated columns of gas arising from the sun's interior, and that the darker portions between are cooler descending currents. It is well known that the photosphere or visible surface of the sun appears to be much brighter in the center of the disk than near its circumference. This is due entirely to its gaseous nature and to the fact that it is surrounded by an atmosphere of dense enveloping cooler gases. Rays from the center of the disk travel a shorter distance through this atmosphere than the rays from the rim, and therefore are absorbed less by surrounding gases. We look further down into the sun's interior near the center of the disk than in the direction of its circumference, and so the light appears more intense there. The photosphere is the region where sunspots appear, and they are found in zones extending from 8 degrees to 35 degrees on either side of the solar equator, never appearing exactly at the equator or near the poles. The disturbances that produce sunspots and many allied phenomena occur cyclically in periods of 11 years on the average. The first outburst of the disturbance is manifested by the appearance of sunspots in high solar latitude. These break out and disappear and break out again with increased vigor, working gradually downward toward the solar equator. The maximum spottedness for a given period occurring in solar latitude about 16 degrees. The disturbance finally dies out within 8 degrees or 10 degrees of the equator, but even before one cycle of disturbance has entirely passed away, a new cycle has broken forth in high latitudes. So during the period of minimum spottedness, there are 4 distinct belts, 2 in low latitudes due to the dying disturbance, and 2 in high latitudes due to the new disturbance. At sunspot maximums, there are 2 well-marked zones of great intensity, approximately 16 degrees north and south of the sun's equator. Sunspots are solar cyclones, occurring usually in groups, though large single spots appear less frequently. Each spot is quite sharply divided into an umbra and a penumbra. The umbra is the darker central portion, the funnel of the whirling cyclone, and the penumbra is composed of the outspreading gases and is less dark than the umbra. The peculiar thatched straw structure of the penumbra is due, it is believed, to the fact that the columns of gases that usually rise vertically from the sun's interior and form the rice grains of the photosphere are drawn into a horizontal position by the whirling motion that exists in the penumbra regions of a sunspot, and therefore we get a longitudinal rather than a cross-sectional view of them. The umbra of a sunspot is anywhere from a few hundred miles to 50,000 miles in diameter, frequently exceeding the Earth in size, while the penumbra occasionally reaches a diameter of 200,000 miles. Sunspots of exceptional size can be seen even without the aid of a telescope. The darkness of sunspots is only by comparison with their more brilliant background. Owing to the rapid expansion and cooling of gases, the temperature in sunspot regions is far below the normal solar temperature of 6,000 degrees centigrade, lying between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees centigrade. At this temperature, it is possible for the more refractory chemical compounds to form, the oxides and the hydrides, and the spectra of sunspots reveal the presence of titanium oxide and magnesium and calcium hydride. At the higher solar temperatures that exist elsewhere in the photosphere and in its overlying gaseous envelopes, all chemical elements occur in a free state, intermingling as incandescent vapors without the formation of any chemical compounds. Strong magnetic fields exist in sunspot regions, and magnetic storms in our own atmosphere frequently accompany the appearance of exceptionally large sunspots. Directly above the photosphere of the sun lies the reversing layer, which is about 500 miles in depth, and is composed of the incandescent vapors of all the chemical elements that exist on the sun, which are also the same familiar elements that exist on the earth, with the exception of coronium, the unknown element in the solar corona. There is no element in the sun that has not been found on our own planet. The reversing layer receives its name from the fact that it reverses the solar spectrum. It produces, by its absorption of the rays of light from gases below, the dark absorption lines found in the spectrum that serve to identify all the elements existing in the sun. During the time immediately preceding and following a total eclipse of the sun, this reversing layer produces what is known as the flash spectrum. When the photosphere, which gives the bright continuous background of the solar spectrum, is concealed by the moon, the normally dark lines of the reversing layer, dark only by contrast with the bright background, become momentarily intensely bright lines against a dark background. The flash spectrum only lasts a second or so, as the reversing layer itself is soon covered by the moon. Just above the reversing layer lies the chromosphere, which is between 5,000 and 10,000 miles in depth. Many of the gaseous vapors of the reversing layer are found in the chromosphere, thrown there continually by the vast upheavals of gases that are constantly disturbing the surface of the sun. The greater the solar activity, the more is the chromosphere charged with the vapors of the lower strata of the sun's atmosphere. The gases that are most characteristic of the chromosphere, however, are the incandescent gases of hydrogen and calcium, which give it the pink or reddish tinge so noticeable during total solar eclipse. Helium is also found in great abundance in the solar chromosphere. Shooting upward from the photosphere with a tremendous velocity of 100 or more miles per second can be seen at all times by properly screening off the light from the photosphere, the vast solar eruptions known as the prominences. These are composed chiefly of hydrogen and calcium gas, though other elements also appear, especially near the bases of the prominences. Prominences are of two varieties: the quiescent or cloud-like prominences that float high above the solar surface for days at a time in some instances, and resemble terrestrial clouds in form, and the eruptive or metallic prominences that dart up from the surface of the sun in an infinite variety of forms that may be entirely changed in the short interval of 15 or 20 minutes. These eruptive prominences usually attain heights of 30 or 40,000 miles on the average, but exceptional prominences reach heights of more than 100,000 miles, and in a few rare cases have reached elevations of over 500,000 miles, or more than 1/2 of the solar diameter. Prominences are the most spectacular and beautiful of all solar phenomena, with the possible exception of the solar corona, which is the outermost of all the solar envelopes and also the most tenuous. The extent of the corona is enormous. Its outer streamers extend usually to distances of several million miles from the center of the sun. Measurements of the coronal light during total eclipses of the sun have shown that its intensity is only about 1/2 that of full moonlight, and it seems almost impossible to devise methods for detecting it, except during total eclipses, on account of the extreme faintness of its light. The sun, it is now known, is surrounded by a strong magnetic field, in addition to the magnetic fields that exist in sunspots. The cycle of sunspot change is attended by marked changes in many forms of solar activity. The frequency of outbursts of eruptive prominences, the brightness and form of the corona, magnetic storms, and weather changes on the Earth are all closely associated with the sunspot cycle. The cause of this sunspot cycle, with all the attendant changes in the general solar activity, and the source of the apparently limitless supply of solar energy, still remain the two chief unsolved secrets of our sun. And with the end of that chapter, and before we start the next very long one on our solar system, I think we'll end this evening's reading from Astronomy for Young Folks by Isabel Martin Lewis. It's certainly true that some of her information is now out of date, but I still love how much she got into this little work. If you'd like to read it for yourself and see the diagram she refers to, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect or suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod, or send me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. I always love hearing from you. I'm so glad you could join me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.